I'm Krughul, and this is my story. I was born on a tiny merchant fishing island days west of Terra known as Isolity. My parents were Elaine and Garrett Oceanus. Isolity is surrounded by mountains on all sides, with an iron gate that is raised for ship departures and arrivals and nothing more. Known for their gems and emeralds in the mines beneath the mountains, as well as fishing, this is a prosperous merchant island that has had peace for many centuries. There are two races native to this island. It is humans in the city port, which is surrounded by a lake that leads out to the ocean, and then mountains full of orc clans. For centuries, the mountain clans of the orcs would come down every year for something known as the Festival of Dock, which signifies the end of trading season. This acted as a truce between the two races of the island. The humans would provide import and export of trade, food, and other materials, and the orcs would protect them since the humans of Isolity had no army. During the recent decades, King Eldorus, a religious figure as well, decided that their god had made him more powerful and that the help of the orcs would no longer be needed, and this law would be effective. After the last festival, they would not be allowed to come to the city anymore. Thus ended the Festival of Docking. While this was going on over the last couple decades, the orcs had already felt that their trade deals had been becoming one-sided and were getting a raw deal, especially over Eldorus' rise to power. On the day of the last festival, a shaman came down with the leaders of the orcs and cursed the human women of the town to potentially give birth to mutant children known as half-orcs. I was born 100 years after the last festival, and at age 5, I felt like a typical human child, just taller and bigger than most of the 5 to 6-year-olds. My father, who was now the commander of the new military, would boast about my strength and size, gloating to the rest of the city. While my father was on tour, my body started to change, skin changing to a brown-greenish color while my eyes went from blue to green to yellow to red. My mother knew what this meant. For the first time in 20 years, the nation had a half-orc child born, and the law for the child was to be executed. My father came home from tour, and I can still hear my mother begging to him, "Let me escape, spare me." She even pleaded that you could let me drown and become a tide of the sea, anything to keep us safe. The next night, my mother brought me to the pier to cross the water to the mountainside opposite the city, where an orc named Krughul would take me to their clan. The king and the army raided the house to look for me. I can still see the flames of my home being burnt as I'm sailing across the lake. Krughul dropped me off at shore and said, "Wait, Christine." He stuffed a rag in my mouth to muffle the sound as he slashed at my face, blinding me in my right eye, leaving a deep gash from brow to jawline, to mutilate me, make me hard to recognize. The pain came, I bit the rag. Bleeding quickly stopped so did the pain, because Krughul had this magical power, and as he told me, "I am the shaman who cursed your city over 100 years ago. I'm going back." And with that, Krughul sailed across, back to the city, to try to help my mother and father. Last I remember as I was scaling the mountains was my mother's scream as Krughul and both my parents were executed, Krughul being burnt alive in front of them first. I had no place in the orc clans because without Krughul to bring me there, I was not welcomed, and it was to prevent a full war with the humans if there were to be any word of my discovery. Since then, I became a stowaway on an Isolity ship heading east, where it landed on the southwestern coast of Terra. I don't remember the town. I just remember heading east and living the rest of my days since then in the Dead Forest, where I learned how to survive, became a ranger who changed his name from the day he left to the orc who gave me the opportunity of life. Though it's not much of a pleasant or happy one. My drive to wrong those who wronged me, my family, my existence, is what keeps me going. I am not Christine Oceanus. I am Krughul.